give good gifts to them that ask. Eric and I got married when I was 20, and we were blessed with a child 2 years later. I truly believe to know the heart of God is to hold your baby.
Amen.
When I first held my daughter, everything changed. It was nothing about me. It was about her. And if you're a mother or a father, you know what I'm saying. It's no longer about you. And even at a young age, I was only 22 years old, but this little girl was everything. And if she needed something, if she cried at 2 o'clock in the morning, I didn't want to get out of bed, but I had to get out of bed to feed her. So when he asked the question, if we are evil and we know how to give good gifts to our kids, how much more does he give good gifts to us? Again, I go back, you have not because you asked not. And that's just interesting that in his word, he tells us to ask. And he even shows us that he's got good intentions for us. We forget this sometimes.
Amen.
When I heard some of the words that the Lord was speaking to me, I had been determined that I did not want to get to heaven and the Lord look at me and say, Sarah, I really had really good gifts for you. I had so many things I wanted to do in your life, but you didn't ask. I would rather him say, honey, I had to tell you no because you were always asking. We forget that he wants us to come to him. He wants us to ask him. He wants to hear from us. There is a story, and it's so funny because I did not discover this up until a couple of weeks ago at a Bible study. Joseph, and I counted because this is Joseph's great, I think it's 4 great-granddaughters. We have to remember that this is a time in Israel that women were not, actually not in Israel, in society. Women were, they were properties. Okay, a lot of people just thought of women as properties. They weren't valued as daughters of God, definitely in the pagan world. And even in the Old Testament, some people did not see women as valued. God always saw us as daughters. That was never God's intent. But these daughters of Joseph, and this is in Numbers 27, 2 through 8. And like I said, when I saw this, it was like I was so excited. These daughters of Joseph, they stood before Moses and before Eleazar the priest and before all the congregation. These daughters, their father had died in the wilderness. There was 4 daughters. Their father had died in the wilderness, and he was the ones that had gathered against God. I don't know a nice way to say it. He wasn't a good guy. He was one of the ones who was fighting God. And the earth swallowed up. That was their dad. There were 4 daughters. Their dad, they knew, it's not right with the Lord. And they went to Moses. And they said, why should the name of our father be done away with from among his family because he hath no son? They were asking for a part in the possession because back then, women were dependent on a husband, a son, a brother, a male to take care of them, and there were none. They went before Moses and said, how are we going to survive, basically? And Moses, being a man of God, said, I'll be right back with you. I got to go talk to my father. And God tells them in here, it says, the Lord spake to Moses and told them that the daughters speak right and that you should give them a possession of an inheritance among their fathers.
Amen.
These were women, again, whose father was not righteous. But they went boldly to Moses, believing that Moses was a man of God, which he was. And they said, what are we to do? And he said, let me go talk to God because we know that if it's a man of God, he's going to say, let me go talk to God. Let me go talk to God and find out what he says. And the Lord, in his mercy, said, these ladies are right. You need to take care of them. That's in Numbers 27. I was so excited when I read that story. And then one of my favorite stories, and I would talk to my husband about this lady, is one that Jesus said in Luke 18, 1 through 5. He talked about a parable, and he said there was in a city a judge which feared not God. Again, this is not a godly man. He doesn't fear God. Neither regarded man. He not only did not fear God, but he wasn't worried about people in general. And there was a widow in that city. She was alone. She didn't have anybody to help her. Like these ladies in Numbers 27, she was by herself. And she came into this unrighteous man, this unrighteous judge, and she said, avenge me of my adversary. And he would not, because he didn't care about men. And he says, he wouldn't for a while, but afterwards he said unto himself, though I fear not God, nor regard man, yet because the widow troubles me, I will avenge her, lest by her continually coming she wearied me. So basically this is saying, I'm going to do something about her situation because I know she's not going to quit.
Amen.
And Jesus saw this as good. He saw this as good. I go back to that first, you have not because you ask not. These are examples of women in the Bible that did extraordinary things. And as I said before, there is nothing extraordinary about me. But I have a Father that there is.
Amen.
Also, several places in the Bible, it talks about God's character, what he's like. He's gracious, he's long-suffering, he's slow to anger. And I was thinking about how we sometimes view God. It says to test God, to taste and see that he is good, to try him. Those words are said over and over. We as Christians, a lot of times believe that we don't want to bother God with the small things, that we only want to bring the big things to him. And I think the reason that happens is because Satan has confused our thoughts of what testing and tempting are. And I'm here to tell y'all there's a difference. Tempting is like forcing your will on somebody and then trying to make them make a decision based on you. Testing is proving. Proving if you know somebody or if you know something. In this case, if you know somebody. And he tells us to test him. And it's funny because in Sabbath school we were talking about tithes. And he says, go ahead, try me and wait and see if I won't open up the windows in heaven and pour out a blessing. In other words, why don't you see who I am?
Amen.
I'll show you who I am. I'll show you the strong hand of strong arm of mine. I'll show you that you can't outdo me. You can't outgive me. Now, I tell you all of this because I'm trying to set a stage that I was not in. When I was 20 years old, Eric and I got married. I thought in my mind that when we got married, I was a young bride. But I thought that because we were Christians, that everything was going to be great. I was so naive. I hate when I hear people say, if you're a Christian now, life's going to be easy or good. I'm like, I don't know what kind of Christian you are, but I've never seen that. But at 20, I did. I saw it as being now, everything's going to be fine, we're married, life is going to be wonderful. I didn't realize the tests that would come and the things that the Lord would show us, and His mercy and His loving would show us and allow us to be part of. So Eric and I had our first child. I was 22 when we had Sierra, and now she's a law student. That's unbelievable because it seems like yesterday. 3.5 years later, we would have our son, Connor, who's now a first-year college student, which, that means that I now have both my babies out of the house. That's another story, too. The Lord keeps testing in areas. But we went to church every Sabbath. But we would fight. Now, I'm going to say that's not unusual to fight. And if you've been married any length of time, you know what I'm saying. You're going to have arguments. Everything's not going to be perfect. You're going to have disagreements. But we're Christians, and I thought, that's where it ended. I remember one night, Eric has told the story about him being in martial arts. I didn't see that as a bad thing. I didn't know very much about it at the time. I would go to the martial arts studio with them, but they had something that all of the families were on the outside of, and it was called high rank class, and you weren't allowed to go and participate, and it was late at night, and I didn't care to go and participate anyway. I was tired. I had little ones. But one day, and I don't even know what happened, because a lot of it is like a blur leading up. One day, Eric came home and told me he wanted a divorce. I'm going to be honest with you, I thought he was joking. But if you knew my husband, once he had his mind made up, there was no going back. That's the best way I can say it. Once he had his mind made up, you could not stop him. That was in the ring when he fought. That was just in life. That's just who he was. And when he told me he wanted a divorce, I don't want anybody to think that I was perfect and he was not. We both had our different issues, but I didn't think it was something we couldn't work through. Eric came from a divorced family. I came up from a divorced family. But God didn't want that, and I knew that. When he told me that day he changed. He changed towards me. He was not home. He would stay gone all night. I didn't know where he was. Anybody who knew me would have said, Sarah's out of there. She's gone. I would have told you, but I was out of there and I was gone. I have a very loving family that's very supportive of me. And his mother is, I have a great mother-in-law. I'm very blessed for that. I had people that would support me and, what if I needed to go. And everybody thought I would move to Texas. But I did not. It wasn't because of anything I planned, but it was something that the Lord planned differently. The Lord took me on a journey that I never could have prepared for. And to be honest with you, it was not a journey I wanted to go on. So he tells me that he wants a divorce. He started staying away at night. It was very hard. It was very hurtful, but I had 2 young children. And I could not cry in front of them. I tried desperately not to. I didn't tell my family for a while what was even going on. It was something I thought Eric would come to his senses and everything would be okay. There were people who asked a lot of questions, people that were supportive. There was this one lady, her name is Linda, very strong Christian, I could call her at 2 o'clock in the morning, cry, she would pray with me, and I know the Lord put her in my life for such a time as that. I know it. I started losing a lot of weight. I was in my last semester of college, student teaching, when Eric moved out. I was going to quit school. I look back and I see all the people that God placed in my life, and it's amazing. I had a professor that I went to go tell her that I was quitting, and I had lost down to maybe 90 pounds. My clothes were falling off of me, and that my professor looked at me and said, "I won't allow you to." And I was like, "What? I don't think I'm asking permission. I'm telling you I've got to go get a job. My husband has moved out. I did not know where my next meal was going to come from with our kids. I was stressed. I didn't have family around. And I saw it. I have to go to work." And my professor said, "Well, bring your children. I'll watch them." I was like, this is not common for somebody to do something like that. And somehow, some way, I stayed in school because of the mercy that lots of people showed me. My professors, people who helped watch the children, and just the kindness of strangers. I remember one particular day, and it's hard sometimes for me to share some of this stuff, first of all, because I don't like going back. But I also have met a lot of women that I know have gone through this stuff. And there is difference when you talk to somebody and somebody says, "I'll pray for you." As somebody who's actually been down that road and done that, and then that person say, "I'll pray for you," because you understand. You understand. And I can remember one day, Connor was in diapers. So he was probably 2 and Sierra was 5. We did not have food in the house. And again, I did not want my family to know stuff. I think Eric had not quite moved out yet, but he was looking for a place. No, I take that back. He had just moved out. So he had a place in town, and I didn't tell anybody about things that I was going through for several reasons. And one day I just opened up the front porch, and there was groceries on my front porch. Nobody knew that I didn't have food in the house. I just didn't tell them. It was unbelievable what the Lord can send people to do when you just listen to that still small voice.
Amen.
And somebody had left food. I assumed it was a friend of mine, Linda, and it was not. To this very day, I don't even know who it was, and that doesn't matter because it's a gift from God. And that was the beginning of Him directing things. So I get through that last semester of school. Everybody told me to not even try to look for a job, that there's no way I would get a job because I graduated from college in December. By January, I had a job.
Amen.
That in itself was a miracle because it was so funny. I can remember walking into an interview, and I say it like that because I didn't know I was being interviewed. They just asked if I would stop by, and they were asking me questions about children's book and my favorite. And it would, you're reading to your kids all the time. That wasn't a big deal. And he said to me, the gentleman, that was the superintendent at the time, who did not even realize how bad I needed this job. He was like, "Can you start tomorrow?" I laughed because I didn't know I was being interviewed. And I laughed out loud. I was like, "Sure." And I was joking with them and being very casual. Leaning up against the wall. And he was like, "Okay, well, this is the school I need you to go to." And I looked at him and said, "Wait, are you offering me a job?" He was like, "I thought that's why you were here." And I was like, "I am, but I did not expect to get a job today." And I was working in January. Guys, that's a miracle in the middle of the school year to get a job. And so God just was like leading and guiding and directing. And I was sitting there wondering if He was going to fix Eric. I mean, I'm a very honest person, so some of the things I say, y'all are going to have to forgive me, but I have to just tell you, I don't want anybody to ever think that my faith was perfect and whole and I was just strong. I was not. I was telling God everything that was wrong with Eric. I don't want to go into too much detail, but he was involved with another person. People didn't believe me when I said it. I knew. But they didn't think that that was true. It doesn't matter what they thought. What mattered was God. And I was beyond broken. So I thought, okay, Lord, I'm just going to come and complain to you and tell you everything that's wrong with Eric. And so my prayers would be something like, Lord, I need you to change him. Have you seen him? I mean, look what he has done. That was how I was praying. Now, some Christians would say, well, Sarah, you should have. I mean, what kind of man? They would have, those women and men would have been right there with me then. You need to be praying. We're going to all, in the name of Jesus, pray that Eric Wilson is changed. And I'm not saying that there's not a human side to us that God doesn't understand. But I remember one time when I was praying, something like that, and the Lord said, very sweet and small, because I was very fragile at this time. And he said, but what about you? And I was like, excuse me? Did you not see what's been going on? And he asked me a question. I can change whose heart is yielded to me. Eric's heart's not yielded to me. Do you want me to change you? That was a hard question. It wasn't that God was not saying that my hurt didn't matter. He was talking about healing, and I just wanted to talk about the hurt. He was talking about a relationship when I just wanted to fuss at him. And he led me on a path that I never, ever would have expected for myself to go on. Because I was that person who would have said, look, if a man cheats, you leave him. He is not worth. When's a cheater? Always a cheater. Have y'all heard those? And this is from the church. I'm not talking about from the world. I'm talking about the church. Honey, you are justified. You are justified. You can divorce him. And you're right. Moses did say that in his law, and I'm not saying that in some cases. I'm saying that the Lord Jesus said, because of the hardness of your heart, and that's what he was speaking to me. Do you want your heart to be hard? He took me on a journey that was teaching me to pray for somebody who was hurting me. And the only person I felt like I could go to with this that did not think I was absolutely crazy was my mother-in-law. Because it was her son. And let me tell you, to all mothers, the prayers of a mother matter. Amen. Let me tell you, the prayers of a mother matter. And so I went to my mother-in-law and I told her that I needed her to start praying for Eric. And we did. Eric was not... And it's hard because I know he's here and this is a different man. So I'm trying to respect him as my husband at the same time of sharing my testimony. And I know what he would say, Sarah, you need to just say whatever God tells you to do. But there's some things that when somebody is going through the same thing, I'll talk to them more open than I will to just, a more open situation. So understand that. So we were praying. I was losing a lot of weight. And the Lord's telling me, start praying for your husband. And he was directing me on things I should say to Eric. It was not received. When I told Eric that I was praying for him, he was like, oh, thank you so much, honey. Hallelujah. He was mad. He got mad at me. And I was like, Lord, you told me to pray for him. Why is he getting so mad? And I would go and pick up the kids and say, how are you doing? You don't look well. Can I pray for you? No, you cannot. He wanted nothing to do with me. And the Lord said, okay, start writing Bible verses. Put notes on his door. And I thought, oh, he'll love that. No, he didn't. He thought I was doing it to get back. And then one day, Lord told me to apologize for the role that I played in our marriage. And you want to talk about very humbling, is apologizing to somebody for hurting them when you're hurting so bad. And I did. The Lord started filling me with joy that I cannot even explain. He says that, you know where it talks about your cup runneth over? My cup ran, I was happy. But not this that you would see, but the joy that was just coming because I really felt at peace that God was not going to leave me. He was not going to forsake what he was telling me to do. And so when you start walking in faith, the steps, and doing what he tells you, he really does lead you beside those still waters. And he did some really cool things. During this, I told the Lord that I needed some physical work. I started helping my friend Linda hand make bricks. I had made bricks by hand. I built things. I picked up. It was unreal. I learned how to drive a forklift. I had to be physical. And God knew that. And he started making me strong when I was at my weakest. He started making me physically strong, and I believe he did that to show me spiritually how I was growing in him. I can remember one incident that Eric often shares with people. Our children were little. They were going through a lot. But yet, the joy of our Lord is our strength. I mean, it was coming to, and we were going to church, and I was praying over them, and they knew that they were loved by their Father in heaven. And the Lord told me to go to a mall in Bristol. Now, as I always say, if anybody who knows me going to a mall is not unusual. I mean, I'm a shopper. I love to even go look. I don't even have to buy. I just like to look. And so I go to, but this was not a place I would ever go to. It was not a great mall. I'm just going to be honest. It was not a great mall. There's better malls than this. But I really felt like the Lord was telling me to go to a mall. And I was like, oh, I can get on board with this. So I go to this mall, and I was sitting on a bench, and my children were like playing, because you know how they have sometimes those like play areas in the mall? So I'm watching them, and as a mom, you can see, even if you're looking straight ahead, you see everything that's here. It's going on. And I see this tall man, an elderly man, walking towards me. And you get that mom instinct on, to where you're kind of like just going to the side. And he sat right next to me, and there's all these other benches. I don't know why he sat just right next to me, which made me feel uncomfortable. So I'm kind of watching him, but I'm watching my children. And he turned and starts talking to me. And it says that the Lord sent him there, and that he had a message for me. Now, I believe in angels. I believe that people can have a word for you. But I'm going to be honest, I believe this man was crazy, is what I believed. But I was like, oh, okay. And he said, what you're praying for, God told me to tell you that he's heard you and that he will answer. And that's such a vague, you know how people say vague things? I'll pray for you, and you're not going to be, oh, how did they know? But this man then looked at me very specifically and said, your husband is coming home. And he said the Lord told him to come to this mall, that he would tell him which person to talk to. He told me, and he left.
Amen.
That was at a time that I was like, Lord, are you sure you want me to keep praying? Are you sure you want me to keep going? Out of everything, the most important thing that the Lord did for me is he showed me that I could test him. I could be transparent with him. Eric came home. God told me not to let him. And I was so excited about him coming home. I thought, well, that must be the devil. I knew that he was not supposed to come home. I let Eric come home. It lasted for about 3 months before he left again. And as broken as I was before, it was twice as bad this time. When he left again, he would go to an attorney and start filing for a divorce. I found out about him going to an attorney. I found an attorney myself. I walked into this man's office and I said, I need to talk to you about divorce. And you know what he said to me? And I have to respect him so much. He said, I'm a Christian. I don't handle divorces.
Amen.
I said, good, you're the man I want to talk to. I said, I need to know how to fight a divorce. The Lord has told me not to divorce my husband. Well, what's going on? Is he cheating on me? Yes. But the Lord told me that he would fight for my family, and that if I would allow him, that the divorce that has been in our family on both sides, that he would break that curse and our children would not have it.
Amen.
This attorney looked at me like I was a strangest person, like I was an alien. And he's like, in all my years of practicing, I had never had somebody come here and say they wanted to fight a divorce. He said, you know, this is interesting. Okay, I'm going to help you. And we did. And I sat down. I told him the story, told him about everything, told him what the Lord was doing in my life. Prayed. We prayed together. He said, we're going to fight this, Sarah.
Amen.
He legally does not have grounds to divorce you. You can divorce him and you say, no, we're going to fight it. And so I did. And I told Eric, I said, I'm not giving you a divorce. That went on for a while. I can't remember how long. I'm sorry, I don't remember. There's so much that's a blur. And I think God in his mercy lets us not remember all the details because of sometimes the hurt. But I would say for 6 months, and this attorney got to the point to where he looked at me and he said, Sarah, Eric's getting the divorce. You have done everything. He said, now I'm stepping in and I'm protecting you. He said, it's time that you need somebody to protect you. And he said, so I will represent you and I will do it to make sure that you and the kids are safe. And when I say safe, he meant financially, because not like that. And he did. He started protecting. The attorney that Eric had was known to be ruthless and wanted to be. And my attorney told me, he said, well, every time that he would say for Eric to do, make her do this or make her, Eric would say no. I mean, she's really a good mom. She really deserves to have full custody. Well, actually, no, she's got to move to Texas because that's where her family is. So no, I can't block her and tell her that she can't go out of the state. And so all of this stuff went on. I signed the divorce papers crying. But then the Lord spoke to me and told me it wasn't over.
Amen.
And I told Eric that, which he did not take very happily at the time. He was seeing another person that he was very serious about, that he was planning on marrying. I didn't know all of this at the time. And it's funny because sometimes we think if we know a lot of things that it's better. And I think about one incident. I went like crazy one day. Crazy as far as replaying things over and over in my head. Listen, women, we do that, don't we? Sometimes we replay something over and over and over. I don't know about men. I don't have a man brain. But as women, we replay it over and over and over and over. And then we look at different angles and we play it over and over again. And there was this one day, I thought, and I'm saying I thought because I was deceived and I didn't even know it. I thought the Lord told me to go to this park, and I saw Eric's truck there, his vehicle. And I thought the Lord told me to go on this walking trail. And I walked up, and this girl was sitting on my husband's lap, and I was mad. I was mad at God. I was mad at her. I was mad at him. And she was, this particular person was in martial arts. Let me tell you, I didn't think about that. There is nothing more fearful than a woman mad. And I was angry. I picked up a glass from him. I broke it as a school teacher. And I started, and I was ready to take her and him on. I was ready to fight because I'm naturally a fighter. I guess that's me being from Texas. I'm a native Texan. I'm always looking for a good fight. I was ready to fight. I was mad. Later, the Lord showed me that was the devil trying to destroy me. It did not help the situation. It didn't build up my relationship with the Lord. It devastated me to the point that I was almost paralyzed. I felt like I couldn't move. So sometimes, really try the spirits and see where it's coming from. That destroyed me almost. So this little whispering voice telling me to do this and do that, is it ever God's will for us to be destroyed?
No.
And here I thought, well, it's the, quote, truth, and so it must have been God revealing to me it was the devil trying to destroy me. I stepped way back, and I said, okay, Lord, it's going to have to be you. I've done everything. And he was like, okay, now I've got somebody and something I can work with. Are you tired? Are you tired? Are you at your wit's end? Are you at the point that you're ready to quit trying to fix your marriage? Are you at the point that you really will yield to me? It took a long time. And I can remember when the Lord and I had this discussion, I was in our front yard. My daughter and my son later would tell me how they saw me looking out the window. They're young. And I was yelling at God. I was being real. Up to this point, I was doing that holier than thou. I was praying for her. I didn't mean those prayers. When I was praying for her, I didn't mean it. And I told the Lord that. I was like, you know what, Lord? I don't. I'm your daughter. I don't know who she belongs to, but I belong to you. And I was like David. I was like, you make my enemies as dust. I quit praying that fake prayer. And I told the Lord really how I was feeling. I feel like you promised you would fight for me. Why don't I see you fighting for me? Why don't I see my family being restored? Why do I see my husband being the man he's supposed to be? Why are you taking up for her? That was when I really broke. And the Lord, in his love and his gentleness and his mercy, was like, finally, Sarah. Let me tell you, his shoulders are broad. Amen. David was real with him. You read how David prayed. He was real with God. He was not just pretentious. He saw that he was nothing and would throw himself on the floor. And he was a king. He was a king. And I had not been real with God. In that, I started allowing the Lord to move instead of me trying to move. And I slowly started seeing a change, not in Eric, but in me and how I prayed, how I communicated, how I spent time with the Lord. Amen. I started understanding that it really was about knowing his character, that he is merciful. He's full of mercy. He's full of mercy. He wasn't waiting to try to catch me. He loved me. He was my daddy. I could sit on his lap and talk to him. And he understood already what was in my heart, and he still loved me. I saw that he was long-suffering. that even in my weakness and me trying to control things, he didn't just throw me aside. He instead held my hand and walked with me. He started showing me his face.
Amen.
I started seeing that he loved me. And his love was not how we are. We love people who are nice to us. We love people who do good things to us. That's not the kind of love he has. When it talks about God's love being never ending, we don't understand what that means. He loves so much better. I love my kids. Guys, I'm telling you, if you knew me, I would lay my life down for my children. That was my daughter who had FaceTimed to me when I walked out that door, because if my daughter calls, I'm going to make sure she's okay. I love my kids. But my love is nothing in comparison to his love. And I don't care, I'm telling you, I don't care how much your mama loves you or how much you love your children. You don't love them like God does. His love is never ending. He loves us at our worst while we were yet sinners. He died for us knowing that we were going to spit in his face. And he still said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He still said that. I started discovering God in a whole new way. The devil has lied to us. He has lied to us about the love of God, about him really wishing that all men might be saved. It's not like God has a number up there and he's like, I'm sorry, I can only let one more person in. He really has his arms open and says, come to me, all you who are heavy laden. I will give you rest. He's open, but we have turned our back on him. God started revealing his nature through this, and I can tell you that I told the Lord a long time ago, don't let this be for nothing.
Amen.
And he softly said, I promise I won't.
Amen.
And I got to a point to where he asked me the toughest question, because see, the Lord had been teaching me about speaking faith. Speak faith. It's in his word. What God has put together, let no man put asunder. He was teaching me all these things, and I did the unthinkable. I told my kids, your dad's coming home. The Lord told me to, and I was scared because I thought, but what if you don't? Now, I'm not saying everybody, this is not a story or something for everybody. This is very personal. This is what the Lord told me. I heard God ask me a question, and I will never forget where I was even with him. I was on the side of the bed and I was wrestling about some things. And he said, will you love me even if Eric doesn't come back? Am I enough for you? And I was like, Lord, you told me to tell my kids. I've told my kids their dad's coming home. I've done this. I've done this. I've not gone to Texas. You know what I've done. I did not answer him. I was like, I've messed up. I've messed up. I mean, I'm falling on my knees on the side of my bed. I'm like, I have messed up. I've told my kids. They're going to. And he was just like, Sarah, will you love me even if he doesn't come back? Am I enough? If the answer is no, I was reading. I was wrestling. I went to bed crying, just out of exhaustion because I was not sleeping. I had woken up the next day. I had walked outside and it had been raining, and it's like a beam of light just like came, and the birds are singing. And I was like, Lord, where else will I go? This is it. I'm yours.
Amen.
There's nothing else for me. Without you, what am I going to? Yes, I will. If Eric doesn't come home, blessed be the name of the Lord. A change started happening in Eric that I can't explain. I had no idea about the martial arts. I had, that's not my story to tell. Mine is something different. The only thing that I know for certain was I had a dream one night, And it was, you know, where it talks about Malachi, for the love of many shall wax cold, and it talks about the help me, the hearts of the fathers being turned back to the. And in that dream, I saw chaos all over the world, just chaotic. And then it started getting more specific. You know, there was wars, there was all this, and then I started seeing divorce and all these children and these women crying, and I was seeing all this, and then it got very specific. And in this dream, I saw people from the martial arts that were hooked arm in arm in a circle, and the families were on the outside. And we were trying to get in, but they just got closer and closer in circle, and we were on the outside. I tried to share with Eric this dream. I didn't know what it meant. So when Eric started coming back, there was this one night in particular, and I told my mother-in-law I was still praying for his salvation, but I was done. And I'm going to tell you, my mother-in-law was supportive. She said, Sarah, you've lost all this weight. It's been 5 years, honey. I love my son. There's nobody who loves him more than me, but move on. Move on, baby. Move on. And I was like, Kathy, I am. I'm moving on. I love him. I pray for him, but I can't. I had gotten to the point to where I was tired. And Eric had called me. I told him I did not want to talk. I was going to bed. Next thing I know, and God, he lost so much. It was so obvious to me. One funny story I remember after he had just moved out, it was right before he was moving out. He was packing everything and moving out. Our house got robbed. And it was so funny. I look back, and it's just funny how God works. He told me that I had somebody rob our house to make him stay. And then my dad found out about our house being robbed, and he said, Eric has had somebody rob your house so he could get... Guys, somebody just robbed our house. I mean, somebody had just robbed our house. It wasn't by accident. I think the Lord was putting roadblocks up. Then when he was moving out all of his stuff, the second time that everything was moved out, he had a U-Haul. And they have that, I think, in The Dragon Revealed. They show that, and I cannot watch that. I do not watch that movie. I told him later, because he was like, why don't you want to see it? I said, I love the story. I don't need to watch it. I think the story is for other people to watch, because I want other people to know. I know what it's like. Eric's U-Haul had broken down. He had to call me to come pick him up with his broken down U-Haul. I went and picked him up so he could get another U-Haul to move out. And he didn't know. Our son was too young, but our daughter went chasing after the U-Haul, begging him to stop. And I had to grab her and hold her. And she was screaming for him. That was definitely one of the hardest things in my life to see. Eric didn't know about it until years later when our daughter got quite angry at him and told him all about it. Eric was not running from me. He was not running from our marriage. He was running from the Lord. I didn't know it because, ladies, y'all know what I'm talking about. It feels like something's wrong with you. It feels like, because the devil lies and says you're not pretty enough. You're not skinny enough. You're not good enough. If only you would have done this. If only you would have done that. That is a lie. Don't listen to that. Because God says you are my beloved daughter. I am enthralled with your beauty. I delight. The King delights in your beauty. The Lord spoke to me that one night, and I found it 6 months later in the Bible. And Eric thought I was crazy because I told him, a man told me he delighted in my beauty. That man was Jesus. I wanted him to be jealous. I might not have shared that immediately with him. But that is the enemy who's trying to destroy us and lie to us. I told the Lord, whatever you do, don't let this be for nothing. And let me tell you, he has not. Because, you know, in Isaiah where it talks about that he makes beauty from ashes.
Amen.
Let me tell you, this is a story that I would have walked through. Because it was a story about me discovering God's true nature. His true lovingness. His true that he does not give up on us and what that means. This is a story of somebody who fought for me like nobody would. And I have a great daddy. I have a loving husband. I love my son. But they won't fight for you. Not like God.
Amen.
This was a story about how truly transforming his believing that he wants good gifts for us. So when I say you have not because you ask not, I don't want anybody to ever think that I'm saying, well, you're in your situation because you didn't ask God. I'm not saying that. I'm saying we need to be like that woman who went before that unrighteous king and went and believed and kept persevering, pressing forward, and asking until you get an answer. I asked until God answered me. And that is not something that is just for me. That is something as believers. Why aren't we doing that? If you have a child that you're praying for, don't quit praying. Don't quit praying.
Amen.
If you've got a situation in your life that's impossible, whether it's health, whether it's financial, why do we think that's too big or too small to take to God? Don't quit praying. Press your case forward.
Amen.
Press it.
Amen.
Press it. He will always answer. And I want you to hear me. He will answer you. He promises he'll answer you. But I want to get to heaven and him say, Sarah, there were times I had to tell you no, but girl, you always asked.
Amen.
I believe that. I press your case. Do not give up because he promises he will not give up on you. He will not. So when I say that, you have not because you ask not, there's a problem, church. Ask. Knock. Press on. Because God promises he will fight for you.
Amen. Amen. Praise the Lord.
And that is my testimony.
Praise the Lord.
Can we pray again? Is that okay?
Yes.
You want to come pray with me?
Yeah.
You have to kneel with me. You want to pray?
You pray.
Okay. Father God, I just thank you so much for your mercy, for your love, for your ever-ending love, that you don't give up on us, that you promise that you will perform that good work, that today is the day of salvation, that we can press our case and come boldly before the throne, knowing that you love us. I just thank you for that love. Father, we don't know how to love, but your love is perfect. It's whole. Teach us, Father. Teach us. Father, I ask that you be with everybody that is here, that you would bless them abundantly, but Father, more than that, that you would give them a word about praying like that woman did. That you would show them that you truly are long-suffering, and you would teach us what that means, Father, by letting us come boldly before that throne. Daily, moment by moment, minute by minute, whatever. But believing that you have good gifts that you want to give us.
Amen. Father,
I ask that you would be with us, that you would change us, create in us a clean heart, renew a right spirit within us. Give us that true, loving, contrite heart. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen.